feeling being in Antarctica through the Erebus and all that horrible stuff. But and Daryll's wife Barbara is here, and she's going to be part of the technical team tonight, operating the slides. But I'm not going to say any more about Daryll because he can speak for himself. So there you go.
Thanks, Andy. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming on. I guess this afternoon's talk is really not all about climbing. It's more, as I've always thought, it's more about route finding and perseverance, because some of these quite straightforward peaks took 2 or 3 trips to find a way up them. Is it working okay?
No.
No?
It's on.
Any better?
Yeah.
Oh, right, it'll be really close. So this is the peak, the list of peaks that I decided on. It's grown over time a little bit as new peaks have been added. 2 more recent ones.
I should just interrupt for a minute because I should have said this. These peaks are all the named peaks in Arthur's Pass National Park.
Correct.
And maybe some people might not be aware of that. So
Right,
I'll just make
okay.
that's what Daryll's challenge, his self-imposed challenge, was to climb all the named peaks in Arthur's Pass National Park.
Yep. And so what happened to set the mission off was when I was first climbing, most of it was just concentrated around Arthur's Pass. And then after a while I said, well, I need to explore the park more. And I said, by setting a target of climbing all the peaks, that gave, sorry? All the named peaks, sorry. That gave me a reason to go to these different areas. And I never set any time frames or whatever. I just sort of ticked off 1 or 2 a year. And that was slow going because we spent some time overseas in between. And then in 2009-10, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that meant, we better get on to this job. So there was still about 15 or 20 to go. So Barbara and I were working on that list. And that became a focus for the since 2010, 2011, basically. That's when we first thought, well, if we don't get on to doing them more than one a year, then it wouldn't happen. So the peaks themselves, there's a little bit of license in there. Not all of them are exactly in the park. Some are really right on the border. So that's why the number's there. And the last little 2, Warnock's Knob and Dudley Knob, I didn't have them in until my son says, but they're named, you have to. So that's why they got into there. So I also like to make some acknowledgements of the help I had, basically. Firstly, my wife, who initially helped by looking after the family while I was away climbing, and then since once the children ran away from home, then we were able to go away more often. So Barbara accompanied me on most of the latter peaks, and then there was 2 other people. It was Stuart Columbus and Murray Cullen. Also, Murray, especially on the earlier ones, and Stuart on the later ones, it was good to have those people to go away with all the time. So, it first started, I'll just see if I'll flick one, Barbara. So, this is a group may have, the older people who have been with the Alpine Club for some time, may recognise them. Graham Murray, Clive Caldwell, Bruce Drury, myself, and Dick Sandham. So this is the night before my first climb at Arthur's Pass, which was Philistine. And 5 of us from the Canterbury University Tramping Club decided to do the trek, or the traverse through to Arthur's Pass. And we started the night before here and climbed over Philistine to Waimak Falls. But, we had 10 days of food and mountaineering gear, so it took us all day. We left at 6 in the morning, and it was 8 o'clock at night when we got to Waimak Falls. So that's probably a record for the slowest descent over and down the other side. Next one, Bob. So this Philistine, this is a much more recent photo, of course, but the conditions were, it's time much the same. So we had the conditions like this, and that was my first time on crampons, ice axe, etc. And I had old farming boots, not climbing boots. Next one. And then just further along on the ridge, just carry on, Barbara, through it. One of the beauties of climbing Philistine is, of course, you can get a really good view of the Atira face, and just the routes on that. And that's that became my second climb in Arthur's Pass. And we did a route, Bruce and I did a route on this somewhere up in here. And I can, even to this day, remember how good the rock was in this section up here. So, and so that's like, Rolleston is the mountaineer's favourite peak of Arthur's Pass, although it's not often as climbed probably as Avalanche. Next one. So here's a very early shot on that first climb, where Bruce and I climbed it, and we then traversed along the top to, this is probably the middle peak, and then to the low peak where Bruce went to ride back down. Unfortunately, Doc did take that bike away eventually, or someone did. So there, this is another shot from Rolleston that you can see the two people climbing. This is really good conditions for Rolleston. You can see the two climbing, and then the tracks further across. I think that was taken when we did a trip right through to Armstrong and back on skis. And it was a side trip to the Rolleston. Next. So I'll just do on Rolleston a little bit, not all the peaks though, because most of you will have known them quite well. This is just climbing up to the col between the middle and low peak, middle and high peak. Next. Yep. And then this is climbing, Adrian climbing the col from the col up on towards the high peak. And climbing on the Atira face. So that's some of the, it's really some quite good rock there, not lower down, but further up, it's really good. And then it's on a good trip on the Rome Ridge. And that may have been on an Alpine Club trip really, really early that George Edwards and Pete Douglas led. So that was one of my early trips as well. And then, so one of the nice things about Rolleston and going over Rolleston, it gives you access, good access into that Waimak Falls basin, which gives you good access then to climb the likes of Carrington and Armstrong. And one trip we did, we basically used skis all the way from the bridge on the Atira over and down, climbed Armstrong on ski, then back over and skied down from the low peak all the way to that little bridge across the Atira, you know, half an hour from the Atira car park. So that was just wonderful. And it's Murray and Mount Armstrong, of course, just from that spot. And then the second time, another time I did that trip. Next one, Barbara. This is Barbara coming over. Barbara and I and Murray decided we would do a trip into there to climb the 4 peaks in one weekend. So we picked a good weather window and went from the car park over Rolleston, down to Waimak Falls, and then we got there early afternoon. So we had a wee snooze, and at 3 o'clock we set off to climb Carrington, and we climbed Carrington, came back to the hut for the night, and next morning we climbed Armstrong, then came back around the valley, up onto the ridge, and along the ridge to Philistine, and back down to the car park. So that ticked off all those peaks in that area. Okay. And this is, Murray and I went to climb Rosamond one day. One weekend, I think we bivvied at Harmon Pass and then climbed it and came back out. And I think that's just off outside the park. It's close enough. Next one, Bob. And that is Murray off route on the way back down from Rosamond. But, you know, Murray being Murray, he sorted that out. He didn't need any help. He worked it out and caught up with me. Avalanche Peak. This is probably, I would think, the most frequently climbed because of the tourist track over. And this is middle of winter, which it probably doesn't get many ascents, of course. And then the next one is the summer route, where it's like inundated with people during the summer. It's probably the most regularly climbed one. Next one, and then there's these two kids chatting, having a talk. So from Rolleston, so that area I've sort of have focused more on the more remote peaks. So that's the ridge from Avalanche, along to Rolleston, and round to Lancelot. Now Lancelot we climbed that from Waimak Falls. So from Waimak Falls you can traverse across the basin and keep traversing round to the south side of Lancelot and then climb it to the top. And then we had to keep traversing along the ridge, or below the ridge, right along to almost to Guinevere, before we could find a safe route over. So next one, Barbara. So that ticked off Lancelot. This is the late John Markison and Mark McKinstry on the just crossing the Tarn on that Jellicoe Ridge, just short of Mount Guinevere. And Mount Guinevere is a really nice climb straight from Crow Hut. Next one. That's Mark heading up. Now Mark he also provided some help. Mark climbed he set a target to do all the peaks in 10 years. And this was his last peak that he had to climb. So John and I went with him. So the next one along that range is Mount Stewart. If I can get this to go. That's Mount Stewart. So this is down the Crow. The route up Mount Stewart, as we found out on the second attempt, is to come up the scree, up, and I think it was on here, up on the top, across here, up behind this, onto the top, and then down this other way. And so Murray and Barbara and I decided we would just do it as a start the trip and just keep going until we finished. So we took bivvy gear. We didn't do it from the hut. So we drove up on Saturday morning and just set off climbing this and carried on. So next one, babe. So this is the scree. You can just see Murray there and Barbara there, and you have to keep on going up. It takes quite some time, but it's the best way up Mount Stewart, because I did try from the other side, from the Waimak side, and it just gets into, you spend too much time on a difficult ridge to get it in a day. Next one. Once you get on that ridge, it's a bit crinkly. We did at some stage use the rope for one pitch, but we continued on up over the summit quite late in the afternoon and down the other side to this really nice bivvy site on halfway down, I don't know, before the tree line there, but there was water there, so we were able to just bivvy there, and that made for a really comfortable night. Next one. So you can see the route there. So this is coming up the Crow, up the Scree, up on the hop, right through. And then from the bivvy site, which must have been down in here somewhere, it took us all day to get out around down here, down to that tarn that the boys were crossing previously, down to Crow Hut, and all the way back out again. That was a longer day than the actual climb. But it's because you have to drop so low. It's quite a low drop down there, and you've got to climb all the way around here, all the way back up again. So that was that ridge, really. Guinevere I climbed in amongst the normal route quite a lot earlier. Guinevere is straight up here, across the tarn, and over here. And it's a nice rock at the top, and down. That's quite short. Mount Stewart, other people have climbed it from this ridge, I think, but it's got to be a pretty awful route. And we tried it, when we tried it from the Waimak, we were out in here, and it just got too much to us. Right, next one. So now I've slipped across to Bill's Basin, Mount Wollaston obviously in the background, because there's a classic route there which everyone should climb. Oh, wrong one, but next one. And that's a winter shot of the Temple Phipps Ridge, which is, a spectacular ridge when it's got snow on it like that. Next one. Temple Buttress. Some people climbing on Temple Buttress. It might be Lindsay, because other people that helped quite a lot with this, I should have acknowledged earlier, with the help that I learned my climbing really from the likes of Tim Wethy, Hugh Logan, Mike Franklin, Lindsay Main, and those guys who are sort of a year or two ahead of me in climbing. Right, and he's also on Temple Buttress. So we climbed that quite early. Bruce and I climbed it quite early with a lecturer from the university, a Fred Cady, and he had put 2 beers in the cold water at the creek at the bottom, at the car park, and they were really good. This is on Pat Barrett and a friend on another really nice ridge to do. It's quite a long trip though, is up to Aiken, and then along to Plymouth along that ridge, and it does take quite a while to come along, and it's got some quite good scrambling in it. The other Mount Stewart is on the western side of the park, and this is Pat Barrett, and the road obviously, the road going down the gorge, and we tried Pegleg Creek, but that's impossible as far as I'm concerned. So we came back to that car park, and we could see a sort of a sparsely vegetated rib up, so we went up there, and that's coming up further. Next one. And then that's Mount Stewart on Hills Peak, so it's quite straightforward from there, just come right round on the top. And we came back because we weren't going to go down into Pegleg Creek, of course. Okay, another trip that I did with Stuart, which is like, you wouldn't bother doing it probably unless you had a target or a mission like that, was to go Brown Hill. You can see Brown Hill when you're coming along, you're driving east on those bluffs above the Waimak River. If you look straight out, you can see quite a pyramidal peak, which is not, Mount Brown Hill is behind that. But I was quite keen to. So Stuart and I walked up to Binza Saddle one evening, and we just camped on the track. We decided there was no one else coming, and we just camped in the middle of the track because we wanted an early start the next morning. And so that's the Binza Saddle down here, and we've come up on the top. And the bush was a bit rough to start with, but once we got onto the ridge, in the trees still, some hunters of sorts had been along. So that was made it quite a lot easier. And the rest is quite straightforward. And what I remember mostly is further along, we were tramping along and slightly vegetated, alpine vegetation on the tussock tops. And next minute, a sow and 2 or 3 piglets just burst out of the scrub in front of me. I got a hell of a fright. They obviously did too. And I was surprised to see them that high. And then when we got to the saddle, Mount Brown Hill saddle, the tarn there was a pig wallow at that stage. And so, but they must have been shot out because I talked to Sandy some years later, and Sandy said, no, the tarn was back into a tarn. It was not, it cleared off again. But it's still, we fortunately didn't need the water. And that's on Brown Hill. So, and then we dropped down to, from there we just dropped down to, well, along a bit further, then dropped down to Andrew's Saddle, Casey's Saddle, and camped the night there before walking out. Mount Fowraker. Mount Fowraker is one of the more recent additions to the park, a few years ago now, named after a professor who was based at Cass. And so Stuart and I went in to climb that. We got up Sudden Valley. Carry on up. So Sudden Valley and up a sort of a side valley from Sudden Valley, then along the top. So this is April we did this. It's just, we stayed in Sudden Valley Biv, so this is a day trip from the Biv. It's enough to get up and back out to the road. Going on. And you can see Mount Scott and Wilson in the background. And I suspect it's either these 2 peaks is what they now want to call Mount Edgar Evans. The application's been put in, but I've not seen any more information about whether that's been formally named one of those 2 peaks, because Bower is called further back. And there's Stuart sitting on the top, or standing on the top. And it's quite snowy for April. And then that's looking back out over the Cass Valley at Sugarloaf, just from there. So it is a really nice view, and obviously you can see it. It stands out from the Cass settlement. So then I've moved over to my favourite valley, which is the Poulter Valley. It's a much nicer valley to walk up than the Waimak. And so we did quite a few trips up in here. First one we climbed Mount Roe, I don't have photos of. The second trip we went in, Stuart and I went into Poulter Hut. Next one. So that's my favourite hut, is Poulter Hut. Next one. Because it faces the northeast. It gets lovely morning sun. It's got a wood burner. And 10 or 12, 2 platforms to sleep, 10 or 12, and you get this really nice view down at the Poulter Range. And it's about an hour's walk from Lake Minchin. So, and I took my rod and caught a fish while we were there. And then we went to climb Mount Morrison. Now, I have to thank Maureen McCloy for helping out on this one, because I had tried previously up this valley and gave up in bad weather up here. The second time, Maureen said, no, take this other scree. So there's a track through the tree, not a track, you have to make your way through the bush till you get into this scree, and then up this scree, probably, I'm not sure which one it goes up, and then all the way along. It just goes on forever. But we made it, and it was just a long day. So that's looking down the scree. It must have taken us 2 hours probably to get up the scree. And then we just carried along from there, and that's the peak in the background. And I remember one of the silly things, I tripped over on the ridge somewhere, and when I finally got to the summit, I lost my GPS. My GPS is gone, not in the pocket. So I thought, I didn't like it anyway, so I had to get another one. And we came back down. On the way back down, we stopped off at a tarn to get some water, and I found my GPS in my other pocket. So it was pretty hard. But it was, fortunately, it was good to have that water, because there's no water. That's the only water supply on the whole trip. Right. Oh, that's the ridge along to the peak itself. So it gets quite rough. So you're not able to go along there really fast. I mean, it's not hard climbing, it's not hard, but you've sort of got to take the steps carefully. And that's standing on all the summits. They're all pretty broad summits. All right. So one of the advantages of climbing Mount Morrison is that you can then see what you need to do to go to Mount Scarface. So I've tried that one a couple of times. So Mount Scarface is just out of the picture over here, but this is the route that makes it possible coming around here, because somewhere along here there's a nasty section which we'd read about it, so we didn't go up, and that's of course Lake Minchin at the bottom. So after 2 attempts from Minchin, not Minchin Pass, the Minchin Gorge track, and both turned back on bad weather, we decided to go up from Worsley Pass. No, from the Worsley Biff, further up the Polter. So next one, and you take the trees the trees are reasonably good, but there's these, along the line of top of the trees is these bluffs. So you've got to find a way through, which are there, but when you come back, you need to want to find the same one back. And that's where I found the GPS earned its keep, is when you're going up through the trees, and then when it came down, you could basically follow the same route back down, rather than trying to discover it again. So, and then the other benefit of the GPS is some of these peaks, you pretty well need a GPS to work out which is the right bump, because some of them are not that well defined. Next one. So this is once you go round and back up on the ridge, and then you can just traverse north along to Mount Scarface. So finally get it. It's just Stuart, just below the bottom, just below the top, should I say. And then from Scarface, you can then see what you've got to do to climb Mount Macrae. The guidebook that Kate's put out, he climbed it somewhere from this side, and he described it as, you know how you get that gravel shingle, which is really hard, you can't make a boot print, he didn't like it at all. And so I decided it looked much better to do it from Worsley Pass. The problem with Worsley Pass was there's no route up to it. Originally there was one, and it got left to, it just didn't get maintained until some number of years ago, and very thankfully Frank King and Honora Renwick, they both spent some time re-establishing the track. And it's exactly the same track, that they located it and then cleared it between where the bits were overgrown. And so we're really thankful for that they've done that. So it goes up, it's quite a nice track. It goes up in here and then just cuts across in the trees coming out about here. So, and they've done, all of us owe a lot of thanks to Frank and Honora for clearing a lot of these tracks that were there before, just needed clearing, and doing some maintenance on some of the older huts, more remote huts. And it's been a huge help. So this is going in. So this is Worsley Pass. On the map it looks great. In reality it's awful. We ended up, it's just all big tussocks and swamp. But we end up camping, I think, just in here. So we walked in up the Andrews Case here to Trustpolder Hut. The second day we walked into here and camped here because we couldn't find anywhere else. And that's just what it's like. It's all like that. And then, so that where we camped, next one, that's right beside Chasm Creek. It's a little creek, and it doesn't seem to flood much, which surprised me because we went back a year later and the campsite was still there. So what happened is, we wanted to go up Macrae from there, but to get up Mount Macrae, you've got to cross, I think that might be background the wrong way, cross Tafana Stream. So if you go to the next one, Barbara, I think. So we wanted to get onto that ridge, but couldn't get across. The Tafana Stream is a deep sort of gully, and it's just all alpine scrub. So we decided we would go up a ridge further east, I guess, roughly, and that looked feasible, and then cut across to this one. But what we hadn't seen was this really deep gulch in the halfway up, which there was no way in and no way out. And of course, that's Mount McRae there. So from there, though, we could see where we should have gone. Next one, though. And what we should have done is come across and crossed it down here. We didn't want to go down through all this stuff to get across to Whānau Stream. But we thought, oh, maybe you can get across down here right at the end, and then further on the true right, there's a nice open tussock slopes with just a few shrubs on. So we trekked all the way back down there along the ridge, because we had camped right where we are, camped right back in here somewhere. And we were down along the edge, and then went up so far. But by this stage, the weather wasn't so good. I was running out of energy, so we decided we'd leave it for another day, and we trekked back out. So a year later, Barbara and I came back in, and this time we did follow that route down, across there, and we were able to come up here, and then just worked our way up this really easy ridge, which just goes right, spur I suppose, or rib, that goes right to the main ridge. Next one. And you know, you go over this one on the right, which is quite lower, it's quite a lot lower than that point. You go over this one here, and then along, and on the other side of this ridge, and that's Mount McRae. And this is a bit of an issue here. I was not that keen to climb through here without a rope, but people do it, of course. So we went across to the next one. So we came along this ridge. Instead of going up through here, we just went across here and then up this one here on the top. And it's a great big flat summit at the top. So that was we're thinking the temple on that one as well. You can, I think, you could. Well, people have come over from Karapuku Biv and gone over the top as well, but I'm not sure of the route they've taken, because wouldn't want to come down here without, with a tram tank without rope. It looks quite steep from there. Rightio. And then that's where we did go up. So it was just broken rock like that up onto the summit. Rightio. And so you can see there, that's where we camped down in here somewhere. And then we had to go along this side of the path, Worsley Pass, and then we worked our way up to the top and back. And that's by far the best way up the mountain. But I don't think it's in the guidebook yet, because the time I got to do them, Graham had already published the guidebook. So it's a bit slow on that. So, but it's a neat trip. On one of these trips out down, it's the first time I've come close enough to see a warple. And we were walking along the Casey track, and he was sitting on a branch pretty well across the track, and he just stood there and looked at us. They switched their head from side to side so they get a better view or something. Eventually we had to chase him away so we could carry on. And I was really tough because I had never seen a moorpork at close enough quarters to actually see them properly. So I'm also on one of those trips we came back out. I thought we were making quite good progress on this target of all these peaks. And we got back out to Andrew's shelter, and Doc had put a new one of these smart maps, these geographics maps, on the wall. And I was looking at that, and it shows the boundary, and I said, that boundary is not the same boundary that I'm working to. This is the old boundary. And so, I got quite despondent at that stage. This is getting too much. So I went home and I did some research and found, it's in 1988 or something like that. It's really hard to find out when it happened. This side of the park got extended. So the boundary now includes, Outlook Peak. I don't know whether they've got Outlook. Certainly includes Mount Turnbull and Mount Crossley. And up here further is Outlook Peak. You can't quite see it. So that means there was 3 more. And that's not many. But these guys take ages to get to if you go from Andrew's shelter. So, but you'll be carrying about 3 days for me. Just leave it there. So what?
I'll go back.
No, that's right. Oh, that's right. So eventually, Andrew Johnson, he said, you could go in. He had gone in and climbed Turnbull, by going up the Huranui, because he sort of knows the farmers. And he said, you can drive your vehicle in there, you know, just a RAV4, you can just drive in there, okay. And so I rang them up, and they said, oh yeah, that's all right. So we'll bring you some beer for using the road. And then that was talking to the manager's partner. And then eventually the weather came right, and Murray could come along with me. So I rang them up again, and he says, oh, no, it's $200, thank you. So it's 10 kilometres of road that you drive, but DOC maintain. This guy charges you $200 to drive that far. So we ummed and ahed for quite a while. Eventually decided, well, you know, to finish this mission, I've got to go and climb them. So I decided to just pay the $200. And but why he gets it is because the fishing guides will pay that money. The fishing guides with clients are happy to pay the $200 because they know that most local fishing people anglers won't go in there because of the cost. So it's not a good, I mean, I regret sort of in a way paying the money because I don't want to encourage that sort of process. I mean, I don't mind paying $20 to go along the road, but $200 cash without an invoice, without a receipt or anything, doesn't sit well with me. So anyway, so I went in with Murray. We did go in. We drove in, and then this is Ant Stream Bib, which is a tiny wee bib we just squeezed into, and we used that as our base. We went over the Dampier Range, Dampier Corner, and down into here for the day. And then next day, we went up. So Mount Turnbull is up on here, so just behind it somewhere. It's quite. You must be able to go up around here because we weren't climbing in that. And Mount Crossley is this one up in here. But we did it over 2 days. We did one day and one the next day. It seemed like too much effort to do them both in one day. So it worked out, and you know the weather was good, and it worked out. And then we walked out the fourth day, and that's a view just looking, southeast, I suppose, off Mount Turnbull. And I think Ant Stream, I'm not sure it's this one or the next one over. Righty up. Now another another bump or another named peak you wouldn't bother to do. There's no reason why you would ever. Is One Shot Hill. That's Mount Alexander in the background. One Shot Hill. The first time I went to climb One Shot Hill, I thought I'd get at it from Waharoa Saddle, but I only got about 20 metres, and that was it. I gave up. It was just so dense. So, that's no good. So we were going in to climb Tarapuhi at the time, and then the track from Waharoa Saddle up onto the Aiken Range, the Whaiwha Tops, was another track that Honora and Frank cleared quite early on. And because it was a track there originally, it got completely overgrown, and they spent some time clearing it when the old bib was there. And it just makes such a wonderful job of doing it. And now people use it, especially now as a new bib, people are using it quite frequently. Anyway, I was looking back at this One Shot Hill, which is just in there, and I saw this scree slide, and it stops here. Surely I can find a way up this little bit. And so sometime later, Barbara and I went back, and here's the scree. It's quite a rough scree slide, but it gave us access up most of the way, and then we had taken loppers and leather gloves, and that's the best part, the best things you can take. And yeah, it worked out quite easily. We didn't actually have to do much cutting at all because that scree went up so far. So and then it's one of its redeeming features. It's probably hollows in it, so you can have a snooze after lunch quite easily. There's no wind; you get out of the wind quite happily. And then on the way down, we had to fight our way through again to get back to the head of the scree. And then further down, we have this. It doesn't show quite so well in this photo. The next one might be better, Barbara. The rata in the trees was just spectacular. So that was the real bonus of climbing that silly peak. So it wouldn't go otherwise. Rightio. So, and then we had quite a few trips into Whaiwha. This is Mount Whaiwha. So we once again, Waharoa Saddle, up the ridge, and over a bump, and then around first basin and to the second basin to the old bib, which is there. And that's the old bib in pretty poor state. So Stuart and Barbara and I went in there, And then the weather we knew was not so good next day, so we actually climbed Pfeiffer, which I think is the one in the middle of that, in the afternoon, evening, and then came back for the night. And then we went out went over the tops and down into Pfeiffer Stream, down the other way. Oh, this is climbing the peak. So we've come in.
Daryl.
Yep. Oh, thank you. We've come in across here, up the Wairoa Saddle, up to some tarns in here. You've got to come over this peak. You can't cut across. You've got to come over this peak and down and around and around and around and around. Eventually you get to the bib, which is just down below here. So that was one trip. Another trip we went in to climb Tarapuhi, because it's quite a nice area, this Aiken Ridge. You get up out of the bush the same way, and there's this nice tarn you can camp beside. So we did that. We bivvied this time, I think. And that's, I think, Tarapuhi along there, or along there even. It's not this bigger one. You think it's here. It's actually lower than these ones over here. And we climbed it through up here and then along that way. So it's quite straightforward. And not sure what that was. Anyway, so we had an evening, a really nice evening up on there, just sitting out as the sun went down above that tarn, with a really nice views of Rolleston and the likes. You could just view across to Rolleston, Philistine, and further. Rightio. So the next one, we want to climb. There should be another one in the middle there. Anyway, we want to climb Mount Russell, and this going to Tarapuhi, it not only climbed the peak, but it showed me where to go to climb Mount Russell. Mount Russell is this bump in here. This is Mount Franklin, and so this is the ridge that you've got to go along. So carry on, bub. And so this is going along that. Oh, this might still be going the ridge to Tarapuhi. It's on that ridge on the Aiken Range anyway. And Mount Alexander in the background. So this is a photo that Sandy sent me. He took this from Kelly Range. So this is Mount Russell. This is my last one I had to climb, Russell. And it took me a couple of years. And so you go right along the range and up through here. Now, it doesn't get many climbs, but I do know that, and Murray was telling me that Murray and Dave Crerar climbed it very early on. And so they did really well, because it's not that obvious which way to climb it, which way to go. But they climbed and went right along over Franklin, over Oates, so that's quite an achievement all those years back again. They did really well. So we, go next one, Bob. Go back one. Oh, that might be it. No, that might be it. Yeah, so I looked at the guide for quite a while, which, you carry on, and it says, what made me wonder, via a very exposed section of rotten ridgeline. And we didn't go up the Deception Valley, we went along the range all the way. But in fact, the ridgeline it's not that great, but it's not that rotten either. So that was one off. Next one was the easier one, but the last little bit put me right off that one. There's just no way I was going with the description. Very ugly, best describes this route. So that must be coming straight out of the Deception, straight up a spur. So we flagged that one. Next one. So this is heading back up. Sandy and Murray came with us. Sandy Sandblom, Murray Cullen came with us this time. And we were going up to Waharoa Saddle. You go up Paratu Stream, is it? And it's like, it's easy enough going, but it's quite rough. But you're not actually fighting through the scrub, even though it looks like it. So that's on the saddle, which is about halfway up to where we want to camp. And that's One Shot Hill up to the left, and then we go up to the right, south to go along here. And we got up and we got to the first tarn, and we decided to go further around to the next tarn. So this tarn's on the western side of the range, and it's just a wonderful spot to camp with a view of Rolleston sitting there. So that was day one, getting off the road up to, what's it, about 1,200 metres something, and we're planning the next day. And then we have to go along the range to the next campsite, which is above Spray Lakes Creek. And it's okay, it's a bit rugged, but you do have to sort of look where you want to go, but it's quite feasible. Rightio. Just get down through a awkward bit. And that's looking back. So this is probably Tarapui here, and that's where we've come over from the campsite there and come right along range and down to this other campsite. That's along the range. I think that's Mount Pfeiffer in the background.
No, that's Russell in the background behind your head.
Hmm?
That's Russell above your head.
Oh yes, sorry, you're right. Yes, correct. It's looking east-south. It's a bit the angular. That's Russell there, and that's the peak. But you have to go up here first to go along. That ridge is 1/2 kilometre. So that's another photo of the same thing. So, and in this range, so the Spray Lakes camps is no. Go back once forward, Barbara. See what happens. Yep. How do I do that?
Do you want me
We'll just push escape here.
Well done.
Yep. So that's the Spray Lakes camp. Go back one, Barbara, please. So the camp's down in behind here, and you have to come up through here, along here, and it drops down remarkably in here again. And then the first time we decided it would be easier to go up this green along the ridge, but that doesn't go well either. So Sandy said no, he's had enough, he's not going any further. And so this bit, because you've got to get to here then to carry on. So, sorry, that's to here. That's Mount Franklin. That snow is on Mount Franklin. And this is the ridge just along in here. Okay. So we camped at that main campsite, main tarn again, for the second night. And then this is on the third day, we went to do the climb. That's the ridge coming back, and that's looking back along the ridge. But when we got to the crux of the matter, which if we go back to a couple of photos, Barbara, which I'll show you another one. The problem, too far. The problem, no, back. Back again. Whoa, stop. This is the issue, is the problem. In here, there's a cheval about 20, 30 metres, and it's just steep off both sides, and it's just rotten. And then you've got this 100-metre climb up on the top. So go forward now, a few. Camp there, and long, that's coming back from the main peak, getting quite close. And I thought by the time we got there we were right, but no, it didn't. And we ummed and ahed for quite a while, and it was getting a bit late in the day. We didn't have enough gear really for what we could see, but we were looking straight on, which is not, it looks more difficult than it is. So we abandoned it, and we headed back. So, and I thought, maybe I'll never get up this one. However, so we carried on, and then sometime later I was talking to Eric. And Eric, as you all know, is a legend in canopy mountaineering. Done a wonderful amount here and in Europe. And I said, Eric, I need a Sherpa to get me up this peak. And he said, here you go. He volunteered. So come January 2022, the weather, I could see a weather window coming across, and it looked good. And I rang Eric, and he said, yep, he's in. So we organised ourselves and started again. And that's the Morrison footprint you could just see there on the right. Oh, what happened there?
I've got it on the screen.
You touch whatever you touch work.
Looks like the power cord on the...
Yeah, it must be really flaky, that connection. So this is back at Wahara Saddle, and you've got to head up to the south again. So this is about my fourth time, and that's the ridge that goes up, all the way up through here. It takes an hour and a half or something or other, and that's Mount Pfeiffer over there. And this track, without a track through here, it would just be horrible. So it was just really good. Righto, where are you, Barbara? Yep. So this is the first set of tarns. And we camped at the first time. So you've lost full screen.
I've lost full screen, yes.
I think it's that icon.
It's the one in the middle and the bottom.
It's that icon in the bottom.
You went past it. No, you went right past it.
Over, back.
Go back into the middle of the screen. There we are. That'll do. That's close enough. So that's Mount Pfeiffer from these tarns. This is the first set of tarns that you come to out of the scrub. and that's, you can see Mount Fires from there. So we decided we would camp the first night there. Next one. So, and that it was a good, oh, sorry, we didn't have photos. This is actually the camp the second night. So we come over that little saddle and along the ridge and down to the main tarn at Spray Lakes. But the water had, you know, filled up with weed, and it wasn't anywhere near as good as it was a year earlier. So, but we dropped down a little bit, and the water gets filtered through the ground, and when it comes out here, it's nice and clear again. So we camped just down below that. Rightio. And so here you can see the route, as I said, down, up, so I think it might be straight up the middle and across and along, and then down again, then back up. This time we went straight back up the scree to the top.
On too far.
Too far, yep.
That's Franklin.
And then along here to the top. Yeah, it's a bit tricky with Route Franklin and behind. Righto. And so we skipped out, we got right across to this Chevelle area again. And Eric hadn't climbed the peak either, so he was quite motivated to climb it as well. And so you can just see where he's led Barbara out. We had a little bit more gear. Barbara's leading out across the Chevelle, down to and across the Chevelle up to the other side, so we could get established on the other side of the Chevelle. And it worked all right, but it was pretty loose. You wouldn't want to go off. This is on the other side now, getting re-established on the south side of the Chevelle, on the peak side. And then we had about 100 metres probably of climbing up this sort of rock. Not particularly hard, but you couldn't afford to fall because, from the Chevelle it just dropped down hundreds of metres either side really steeply. So, and that's the sort of side, just looking around to the side of where we were. There you go. And there we are on top, all of us. Finally completed in the January 2022. So it must have been a good 50 years before I got to tick them all off. And I did get it by 70, but not, Eric was a bit older than that, Stuart younger. So that's the peak, and then we had to come back down, of course. So we came back down. This is put into protection for Eric to come down the last little bit. And then that's the route up. So you can't see the Chevelle, of course. It's in behind in here, and then straight up. Now, other people, I'm sure, have gone down when there's more snow and can come up here and come up this ridge, because this ridge is less steep, but it's awful getting across here. And this is like tussocky stuff. It didn't look at all inviting. And so it's much better to go up the main rib. But it's good to have a rope for the bottom half anyway. All right, I think that's it, I think. Next one, Barbara, is there one? No more, rightio.
Okay.
That's
thank
it. Yeah, thank you.
Stay here. So what a wonderful trip. Peak bagging. I love that stuff, and I love
50
those.
years of it.
Yeah, 50 years of it, but it's a wonderful country. So we've got time for a few questions.
Yeah.
Just let's see if we.
Conway and Pascoe climbed all the peaks in Arthur's Pass when the park was a little bit smaller.
Yeah, I think so, yeah, the
But,
park at the time.
But Mount Russell was their final peak around about 1953, and they spent a night, I think on the Deception side, and they spent a night out above Bushline. They found it harder going to than they anticipated. It's written up in Pascoe's two first main books.
Oh, right, okay. I knew he'd climbed them all. There was less of them, of course, in those days, because they say the number keeps growing. And I think there's one or two other people. I don't know. Graham Cates must have climbed most of the peaks as well. But Mount Russell, from my point of view, Mount Russell was the most difficult, quite a bit more difficult than Wollaston. Some of it because you're further away. It's more remote. It's less known what to do, where to go. But it's shorter, of course. It's just that last 100 metres, the Chevelle in the last 100 metres. The ridge itself is quite like the Phipps Temple Ridge. You just got to go along and try.
Did you see many deer in your travels?
Not really, no. You see signs, but we must make too much noise. But we don't. I have seen, but not so much around Arthur's Pass. And you see some chamois at times too. But they've got to be there, for sure.
you have any forced nights out?
No,
Unplanned nights out?
no, not there. So we managed to
Good planning.
always get back, but we're pretty conservative in what we plan to take on. And we also, what we would do in 5 days, other people would try doing in 3 days. We would take 2 days mostly for those upper polder ones and the ones on the Aiken range. We would put basically 1.5 days, and we'd take 2 days, 1.5 days getting into position. When we came out from Russell the second time, Eric needed to be out earlier, and we came round and dropped down to Midway Creek or something into the Polter, and
No,
it
the
was quite a long way out, even still. And I know Neil Sloan and Shona McKee have climbed Russell that way, so it gets a few ascents for sure.
So has anyone in the room climbed all those peaks? No, not one. How many people have climbed all those? Any idea?
I would think, well, I mean, the actual number now, probably no one else. But you can't, at the time when John Pascoe did them, still it might have only been 30 or 40, and that's all the peaks Arthur's Pass at that stage. So that was.
The park's got bigger.
The park's got bigger.
Mark McKinstry did.
Mark McKinstry did, but I'm not sure if he's climbed Falraker or what's going to be called Egg Evans. But he probably could do, but he did them in just 10 years, so, that's pretty similar time I took. And so there's one or two others, I'm sure, who must be, like Murray must be really close, and he's not bothered with the silly ones, that's all. He's done all the better climbs. So, no.
Okay. So look, we're going to sort of wind things up now. You've got more questions you can ask
I'm
Daryll over a
happy
cup of
to
tea.
feed out
But
information on route finding.
I'm going to ask Pat Prendergast to just give a little vote of thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, Daryll. That was so inspiring. Has anyone now got the inspiration to go and copy what Daryl's done?
A bit closer to you.
In case it's a little bit late. I think I managed at 8. No, others faster, that's my limit. But thank you, Daryll, and it amazes me that in between all of those mountain climbs, you actually found time to come with them out with us in the midweek group from time to time. But and Barbara too. And thank you, and let's give them a really good round of applause.
So that's it. Cup of coffee.